Yo, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the 15th episode of the Naus cEDH podcast, Joking About Bands. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Adam, better known as Poppyphobia.
What's up, everybody?
And a new face to the podcast. Joining us today is the TO and Executive Director of Monarch himself, Nick, better known as Joking101.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
But before we get started, Adam, I think we have a few triggers to resolve in our upkeep.
Yeah, thanks, Kian. So to start with, we're going to shout out all of our high-tier patrons. Thank you to Usable Object, Senator Tom, Doot, and Cold Ramen. The support from everybody has been absolutely amazing, and it helps us to continue making these amazing episodes. For our next trigger, though, I'm going to throw it to Nick to talk about what exciting news he has going on with Monarch.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really stoked to be able to be working with Monarch. We've got a couple amazing things coming up. The biggest is, of course, Oktoberfest, which is going to be in Philadelphia at the end of November. You can buy your tickets online now at monarch.cards. Of course, you can always give us a follow on Twitter or on our YouTube or our Twitch page. We do weekly streams, weekly uploads, and are making awesome cEDH content for the community. So come check us out.
Yeah, absolutely. As a part of Monarch, I can say that we are making absolutely amazing cEDH content. And I know that us here at Naus, a lot of us are planning to go to Oktoberfest because that's going to be probably, I would say, the biggest in-person tournament this year outside of like Marchesa. So that'll be really exciting to be a part of. And other than that, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe. And for those of you listening on a podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you leave us a review and a rating as it helps us to reach new audiences. And with that, we'll move on to our main phase. So for today's episode, we are going to have a very fun discussion with our guest, Nicholas. We want to explore the idea of separating the formats of EDH and cEDH and talk about what the results of that would look like. So things like, could a separate ban list for cEDH work, and what would that look like, and how would the community react to it? Plenty of questions like this and more, so let's get into the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think to start off, we should discuss, does cEDH need its own ban list, and should we even separate the formats?
This is an interesting question. And I think, right out of the gate, this is a very polarizing question, right? A lot of people feel very strongly one way or the other. And I want to take a step back and take a second to approach this with a little bit of nuance. Because this is, we're starting right off the gate with a toughie. So with a separate ban list comes, there's some implicit problems with a separate ban list, right? The biggest one is splintering, fracturing, or otherwise causing the community to diverge from a consensus. Right now we have consensus, even if that consensus is controversial. If we were to propose a ban list change, to diverge from the RC, we'd immediately have some amount of people who would refuse to change and some amount of people who would agree. And so I think that generally I lean towards the answer of no, because I think that fracture or that splintering is going to do more harm than good when you consider the cEDH community as a whole. I think that there might be some exception for tournament constraints and for tEDH having a ban list of its own, but just sort of cEDH as a general rule, I think my inclinations generally lean towards no because of those concerns.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's like a good way to analyze that question. Because like you are right, there's like a general consensus, right? As a group, we all agree kind of what cEDH is, and there's been this big shift in the community where like people don't call cEDH a format, right? It's a meta of an existing format. So there is like that large subset of people that are like, no, this is what it is, and we don't want to change that because it diverges away from what we know EDH to be. And if cEDH is just a meta of that, then there's no use in making its own separate rules and bans. I do think that there is like an outcry though from other people in the community, and specifically lately, right? Like with things that have been going on recently, with wanting to separate and be like, no, we should make this its own thing and try to separate ourselves, because at the competitive level, there is a sort of separation. There's tons of disagreements and tons of things like that go on between the casual community and the competitive community if you want to separate it into those categories. And I think that some of the hardcore competitors do want that separation.
Agreed.
So I think that one of the problems with, one of the problems with separation is that everybody wants, like, okay, so this is a bit of a hot take. Most people don't have a fucking clue how to run a ban list. They're actively stupid. Their opinions are actively wrong. Like they don't understand. Like, and I don't purport to know. Like, I don't purport to stand back and be like, oh, I know exactly what the ban list should look like. But the actual intricacy of running a format is an intensely challenging job, and people often choose to simplify it or think, oh, it's as simple as just banning Oracle and then it'd be fine. Like, otherwise it's fine, or whatever, right? Like, whatever the premise would be. But if you want to make a consistent ban list, right? If you want to make a ban list that aligns with a vision or with a format understanding that is not only like a cohesive vision, but a consistent vision with consistent execution that is well educated by not just subject matter experts, but the data that we have available to us, there's more to it than that, right? Like, if we wanted to make cEDH a format of its own, there are some other questions we need to ask, like, are partners balanced? Do we have to ban Timna? Like, that's
no.
like, people. Everybody wants to ban Oracle, but nobody wants to ban Timna. I guess maybe some people do, but
everybody loves Timna though. Like, she's obviously the best.
Like, and then, like, to your point too, Nick, like, a lot of people don't understand that, like, the upkeep of a ban list is very intensive. Like, you have to look and go over, like, how many games or, like, a meta shift, like, new sets. You know, there's always, like, it's certainly changing, and like, most people don't have a clue. Like you said, ban Oracle.
Well,
that's not gonna fix anything.
Well, with cEDH specifically too, like, the data is not defined.
It's not,
right? Like, how many, like, between like Ken and James and Callahan and all these people, yourself, that are trying to cultivate data and try to figure out, like, statistics and all these things like that. It's so open right now, right? Like, there is no metadata really that exists for cEDH, and people are attempting to find that, but it's not conclusive. Specifically because, like,
the sample size
the tournament circuit, it's very small, and the people that are contributing to it, it's very biased. So it's difficult to, like, find that data to run something like that. And, you know, we have perfect examples of it on this show where I'm like, you know, oh, we should unban this card, and I've been roasted for it. I think Maria Luder, she had it for me in Discord when I said that we should ban Yawgmoth's. Yeah, I was like, unban Yawgmoth's Bargain. That card is awesome. And yeah, she definitely made me realize why it's not that good to do something like that.
I mean, it's definitely better. Like, so I like to classify the ban list into sort of three categories, right? There's the list of bans that don't matter at all. They don't matter. And if cEDH moves to its own format, all of them would be instantly unbanned without a second thought. You know, nobody is out here having their cEDH games just, you know, taken over by, I don't know, fucking
Primeval Titan.
Was it? What's the? Well, that sits in the middle category. Biorhythm's good.
A lot of people argue about Prime Time.
Yeah, like, Biorhythm is not a cEDH card. Nobody out here is going to be, oh shoot, I now have my 10 mana green spell that sometimes wins conditionally. Like, that's not going to do anything. There's the middling category, which are filled with cards that would probably see play, that that would have an influence or do something, or at the very least would be experimented with, right? Like, I think, Primeval Titan falls into that category. Like, somebody's going to try to play with it. Silver and Primordial, maybe a little bit on that lower end. Leovold is pushing the boundary towards the first category. And it certainly would see some amount of play. We just don't know. We don't know what it would do yet with the format. And then, of course, you have the big category, the big boys, your Tinkers, your Tolarian Academies, your Black Lotuses, your Moxen,
your Flashes.
Yeah, your Flashes of the format. And your Hull Breachers. All right, that was on the lower end. I think that's a tier one card, but I'll set that aside for now.
I think that card broke cEDH.
That card's messed up. So I was playing a game with no ban list, and somebody played a Hull Breacher, and I was like, "Yep, this feels like no ban list. Like, this card does feel in the same power level as the rest of the cards that we're playing with."
It's funny too that you bring that up, because I think most people have, like, a misunderstanding of, like, what no ban list cEDH is, right? Because people think it's just like, oh, it's purely card quality, like, you're only going to see, like, all 5 Moxen and 5 color decks, and just, like, people going absolutely crazy. And it's like, no, sometimes, like, it plays out like a cEDH game does, and, like, turns go for a very long time, and, like, people aren't winning as fast as you think, and also people are tinkering Bolas' Citadel into play and like crushing everybody. So
yeah, there's a lot more turn 1 wins. There's a lot more turn 2 wins. Stacks decks are harder to play, but there's an extremely viable mono blue control meta deck, which is called Thada Adele, because there's a Time Vault in everybody's library. So you just take it out of their library and then use the Black Lotuses you stole to cast it. So it's out of there. Yeah, it's a fun format. But it's a bit of it's not balanced, right? Yeah. Which sort of takes us back to like what is a balanced format? What does balance even mean? Like what would we be trying to build if we
balance is a banned card, is it not? Or is it just no? I think that kind of segues good into like our next question that we have for you, which is, what is your opinion of the current EDH ban list? Like we talked about like the stuff that's like what would kind of curate into a cEDH ban list or what all goes into that. But when it comes to like the current ban list, like you kind of seemed like you were in support or like in content with where it's at now. And I'm curious if you want to elaborate on that.
I think that the EDH ban list is pretty close to perfect. Like, I think certainly there's lots of things they could add or remove, right? I think it's somewhat arbitrary. I mean, it's not meaningless. It's not arbitrary, but like they use signpost bans as a way of indicating stuff, and they could change, a biorhythm for an apocalypse or something. Like, back when Worldfire was on there, they could change a Golos for a Hullen, right? Like there's many they have many abilities to swap which cards they're using as signposts. But the sentiment of the ban list, right, the styles of cards that are being used to signpost ban, I think are very effective. The ban list is very small. I think that there's some cards that have much scarier types running around, like Gifts Ungiven, setting aside Intuition. I mean, we have Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor, so I'm not sure what Gifts is exactly trying to signpost. We have Entomb. But other than that, I mean, I'm mostly content with the ban list. I think it generally does what it's supposed to do. I think that it's generally well ran. I think that the RC has a good head on its shoulders. And if they were to build it today, it might look a little bit different. But even carrying with the inertia of it, I think it does well by EDH as a whole, right? With the overarching intention of keeping that ban list as small as possible.
So something to kind of dive deeper into that. So you talked about like the EDH ban list kind of being a signpost, right? Like cards are used as a signpost, and it's used as a way to say like we want to discourage players from playing cards like these, and we're going to use this card as an example to show that. We had our last podcast we had done, it was on like Rule 0, and one of the things we talked about was that like when people talk about Rule 0 or Rule 0ing in cards or Rule 0ing out cards during that pregame discussion and things like that, something that people a stance that we took was that we believe as a group that the RC should not use that signpost type of formatting, because it encourages, at least on like, if we're talking about the casual side of EDH, right? It doesn't do what it's meant to do. Like, I don't think it discourages those cards from play, right? Like, the only cards that really it does do that with are like Land Destruction, for example. But for most of those cards on the list, like, people still play tutors, people still play fast mana, right? And yada, yada, yada. So, like, I want to know, like, are you comfortable with that type of structure, like that signpost type of structure?
Do you play Cyclonic Rift in all of your casual decks?
So I don't have a ton. Like the casual decks I have don't play blue, so there's that.
I'll try again.
Yeah.
Do you play Ristic Study? No, I'm kidding.
No.
Do you play Demonic Tutor in all of your casual decks?
It kind of depends. So like what I have is because of that exact reasoning, I have a list of cards that I keep with my casual decks that I can swap out depending on what the other players at the table want to experience. If people don't like tutors, I don't play tutors. If people like tutors, I'll keep them in my deck, right?
Yeah.
But that's
same question for fast mana, right? Like, I assume you don't play a Mana Crypt in every deck?
No, I don't play a Mana Crypt in every deck.
I mean, that's signpost bans at work. Like, that's them working right now. Like, that's them succeeding in doing what it is they're trying to do, right? Like, the whole point of the RC's philosophy is to get players to talk to each other. Like, hey, we can't curate your meta for you. We can't do that. It's not possible. right? And they're not even going to try. They're going to tell you, here's some of the things that we think you should do, right? These are the constraints that we're going to outline because we have had them ruin our experiences, right? Like that's why, right? We've seen Ka0s ruins games, it's ruined game experiences, it's ruined player experiences. We've heard all that feedback, right? And that style of leadership where it's them not even trying to pretend that they can do the job that you have to do, which is to sit down with your playgroup and have a conversation about whether or not you want to play with tutors, I think is exceedingly wise. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. And they're like, well, just give us a ban list that works for me. And it's like, well, every single person on this planet is going to want a different ban list, right? That's the whole point of Rule Zero. That's the whole point of the curated signpost bannings, is it's like, hey, have the conversation. Look at these cards, understand what they do, and use them as a guide to have conversations about what styles of cards are effective in your decks.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good take on that, yeah.
I think that... Do you want to say something else, Nick? Okay.
No, I was just going to say, like, I was like, oh, I'm very impressed. That was, like, a really good way to
really
like, word that.
Like, thoughts to put together.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of time to think about this. This is something I started running these tournaments, and I think a lot philosophically about the community and what it means for the community to grow and to expand. And I'm intimately familiar with players, right? I run events for them. Players are very fickle. They have a lot of opinions, and they have a lot of unfounded opinions. And I try to found some of mine. Like I do a lot of reading. I like to read what Sheldon has to say, and I've had a lot of great experiences with the RC. And at the beginning, maybe I was a little bit more in my earlier days, I guess I was a little bit more malcontent with the ban list as it stands. But I remember, I'll recall this fond memory of mine. The first time that I realized that winning wasn't fun, I had built a deck back in 2013, 2014, and the deck had a Prime Speaker. It was a Prime Speaker Zagana deck, and it had a Deadeye Navigator, a Sylvan Primordial, and a Prophet of Krufix in it. That was the deck. That's what the deck did. Just Simic shit. And 2 of those 3 cards are now banned. And Deadeye was on the list to potentially be banned for quite a while. And I remember winning a game with that deck, and I was like, oh my god, this is absurd. Like, this wasn't even fun. Like, my opponents never had the chance to do anything. And it's sort of with that in mind that when I heard that those 2 cards got banned, I was like, okay, fair enough. I kind of had my fun with them, and then they got to go away. It's not creating positive or resonant game experiences. And so that kind of set me on the path to start thinking about it more and more. And as I got deeper and deeper into the community, I wrote a 3-4 page article on why we should ban Hullbreacher, and then they did. And I was like, I knew it. Like, I knew this one was a problem. Like, I could pick. Yeah, I know. I edited the post later. It was like, I want to thank the Academy and my parents. Right? And it was like I could. That was one of the ones that I could pick out. Like, I'm certainly not a format shepherd. I don't understand everything there is to know. But I saw Hullbreacher and I saw what it was doing to games, and I was like, yeah, this one. I know that this one's a problem. Like, I can pick up on that, and it got banned. So.
Yeah. I think speaking of fickle Magic players, what do you think the overall community feedback would be if we were to separate the ban list? And would the normalization of an competitive rules committee that accurately bans and listens to the community cause positive or negative waves?
I mean, at the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to get mad.
Yep.
It doesn't. There's no conceivable world where that's not the first. Yeah, that's your out of the gate response. But I think that so I think that if it's going, the only way that it's successful is if the RC comes out and says, "Here's the deal. If you want to play cEDH, you now have to listen to these people. Them's the rules. You can't play cEDH in our format anymore. Like that, it has to come from the top first." More so than anything else. That's what has to happen. Otherwise it doesn't matter, right? Otherwise there will be splintering and fracturing, and I think the RC knows this. They know that if they're going to do something, if they're going to put their stamp of approval on something, it has to be done properly. It has to be done right. It has to be done in a sensible, logical way. And it wouldn't surprise me if the RC doesn't. I mean, we know the RC doesn't want to do it themselves. They've said as much vocally many, many times. They have no interest in balancing Commander in a competitive sense. So you would need to find people who not only have the knowledge and the skill set and the experience, but who also have the willingness and the time and the energy to be on the receiving end of some pretty intense community backlash, because it's going to make a lot of people mad, right? If you come out of the gate tomorrow and say, congratulations, the CRC now exists, we've unbanned Biorhythm and banned Thassa's Oracle, it's like, okay, great. Now we've got to... Now people are going to get up in arms and fucking fight about it. Like, why Thassa's Oracle? Why not Mana Crypt? Why not Dockside? Why not... And so, I think that the community feedback overarching is negative, right? I think that people will immediately out of the gate be unreceptive and uninterested in it. The question would sort of have to be, how do we prove that it is, right? If it is a valid thing to do, why? And it really have to be compelled by that value statement as to why. There needs to be a very strong foundation in the vision and with the intention, and it has to be very clear and transparent and authentic from day one, because otherwise, I mean, if you go to your favorite cEDH grinder and you say, hey, by the way, your format doesn't exist anymore, we're now playing this other format, every single tournament has to change their rules, right? If you don't get 100% buy-in from all the tournament organizers, you don't have a format anymore. People will just keep playing cEDH as we know it. And so now we're talking about the financial investment, right? If we suddenly decide to ban another RL card, right? Gaia's Cradle for some reason gets hit, then boom, now a bunch of people have lost money. Well, currently it was supposed to be legal in EDH, and we never expected it to be banned, and so now a bunch of people are angry. So I imagine more and more that if this kind of thing were to happen, it would very much have to be pulling from the original EDH ban list with as few changes as possible, right? There has to be, there has to be exceptions like Flash, as opposed to the norm being taking out the oracles and the docksides from the world. And I think only then would the community be at least a little bit receptive to something like this.
Okay. How long would...
So,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to be like, so you don't think that like Jim from the Spike Feeders and like Josh Lee Quire are campaigning for a CRC, and they're like, let's bring the competitive rules committee to...
I mean, they might be. I don't know. I don't live behind closed doors, but if they are, then it hasn't happened yet. So
For sure. How long do you think it would take for the community to go from that negative point to the positive point? Like, how many years, how many months? Well, would it take like a certain step by the committee, or would it take like a certain step by like the RC itself to say, hey, stop you bitching, and this is what we're doing now, so just do it? Like what's the timeline, do you think?
I don't know if it's a matter of time so much as it's a matter of meta.
Okay.
Right? If the format is better, then people will play it. I mean, it doesn't... I mean, people will whine and bitch and complain, but if it's sincerely a better playing experience, then they'll just move, right? Like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, you have to sell it from its value as an experience, not its value on principle. Like, nobody at the end of the day, people don't play cEDH because it's the best format on paper. They play it because it's the best format to play, and they get to play with their friends.
True.
Right? Like, it's not about how long it will take for the community to buy in. It's how long does it take for the community to identify whether or not it's something they enjoy. And if people's first experience with it is just like, this sucks, I don't want to change these 6 cards out of my deck, this isn't fun anymore, then they're not going to come back, right? Like, that's just how it goes. They're not going to come back. And so you have to very much sell it on people's first try, or have it be a very gradual change, right? Like, if the first act of the CRC is to unleash 15 new cards onto the format and nothing else, you're going to get buy-in. People are going to be more interested in that because they get more tools and more toys and more fun in games. And if your second act is to ban Ramses because of tournament play, then again, people are going to be like, whatever, that doesn't matter. That's not a card I cared about. But if your first action is to ban Ad Nauseam, Dockside, and Mana Crypt, like, nobody's going to buy into it. They're not interested.
They're just like, all right, so my deck's just done, I guess.
I can no longer play the game.
Cool. I'm not having fun anymore. Like, that's...
I could see like the meme where like it's like the RC's like, we take away Thoracle, but we provide you Labman is still here, like,
the trade offer.
Still good. Basically, the trade offer. No, I think that's something that I didn't think about though. That would be really cool. Like, if you were to separate, right? This is a huge hypothetical, but say they were like, okay, we want to nurture this competitive format and really progress its growth. So we're going to create our own rules, new rules committee for competitive. And the first act is we're going to unban all the stupid bans that ever happened. everybody would be like, oh, yo, what? Like, we get to play with these bad cards that weren't good in the first place. But, like, it's the fact that there's a lot of people out there that are like, yeah, these bans are dumb anyways. And, like, I think that would get a lot of buy-in where they're like, oh, this is the good rules committee. You know what I mean? Or something like that. And
yeah, I think that the bans that are in place for EDH but that are irrelevant in cEDH would only buy favor, right? People like playing with cards. People like playing with their cards. That's why people play EDH. It's the least restricted ban list on Earth in the context of the amount of cards that you get to play. Like there's like, sure, Vintage might have fewer quantitative bans, like, 20 or like fewer, you can play with Black Lotus in Vintage because there's no bans, there's only restricted. Except for Lurrus, I think Lurrus is banned. I don't remember. So like maybe you can play with more cards in Vintage, but EDH is the one where you get to. And I had a fun tweet thread with Shivam about this, where it was like, cEDH is the only format where I can sincerely put both Serra Ascendant and Demonic Tutor in the same deck and have a competitive advantage, right? Like, cEDH is a format that really doesn't, like, what you get to do in this format is fundamentally different. And so being able to give a bunch of people some new toys, some new Serra Ascendants to play around with is like a good feeling. That's a good thing that people would be interested in. The problem is that if the RC does this, all the prices of those cards are about to spike. Like, Gifts Ungiven, that's not going to be cheap anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's been printed into like Oblivion now, but
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I don't think it would.
Panoptic Mirror. Nobody owns a copy of that shit.
No. Although there are like some goofy reserve list cards too that would be cool, or like everybody that's spec'd on Tinker, they'd finally get the payoff.
Yeah, I picked up a foil Urza Saga Tinker, Urza's Legacy or whatever, like the foil Tinker from Urza's. It's like $30, and then like 3 years later, it's now $130, and I'm like, that card's never getting unbanned, but I get to play with it in no ban list, and that's fun.
Yeah, Tinker is cool. So like speaking on like you kind of talked about like the top down structure and how like if we were to separate, the RC doesn't want to take that on. Something that we kind of have thought about is like it'd probably end up falling on the community members themselves, right? And we have kind of a large community that has some very notable faces to it, like people that are well recognized or well respected, or at least for the most part are thought of to be like the not like the spokespeople, but definitely faces of the community. So like if this were to fall into community members, like who would you think would be responsible for creating a CRC or being a part of it?
Yeah, I want to hesitate from just throwing a bunch of random names in a hat. I think there's a few people that stand out in my mind as being exceptionally well-spoken, exceptionally intelligent individuals who would be able to not only voice strong opinions, but to be able to handle the nuances and nature of the format, right? I think for example, Rebel is both an exceptional voice and a very, very intelligent individual whom would be the kind of person that I would want to shepherd or steward this format. I think that the Into the North crew, specifically Morgan and Reed, Sick Robin, and Splintface, are both very, very intelligent, very, very high-level people. But I would be a little bit more concerned about somebody who is so intensely focused on the hyper-competitive grinding aspect of it. Not that that's not like a valuable piece of insight, but that's not what we'd want the entire community to be built out of, or the entire format to be shepherded by. I've only ever had positive experiences with Jim of the Spike Feeders, and I imagine, of course, he'd be an excellent option to bring aboard the Hypothetical CRC. I think that there's some individuals who have been involved in the community for a long time who have taken on community leadership roles. Like people like Shaper or Pongo, who are deeply invested into the community. Natux, IMOC, all the Reddit admins, for example. Sinestra, James, and Natux are all database managers. Sorry, not James. Squirrel Mob. I think of him as James. There's tons of these people who are deeply involved in very high level components of cEDH, whom I think all could have their names thrown into a hat. There are some other excellent members of the community. I know, like Ivaldi, for example. Charles, Mono White Guy, he writes outstanding articles and really does have a comprehensive understanding of the format from a high level and expresses it frequently to the community at large. I certainly couldn't, rattle off 6 names I think make the perfect CRC, but those are the types of people, or those are the types of things just off the top of my head here that I would look towards. And Rebel, obviously, for me, is, I think, the easiest of all the people to shoe in. I don't know if I'd believe in a CRC if Rebel wasn't at least a little bit involved with it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think like that's a good way to look at it. Like if it's gonna fall in the community, you're probably gonna choose well-established community members that are well articulated and invested in the community, right? Not just like. Yeah, not just like, oh, like this is a very popular content creator, or this is someone that does that, right? It's like people that are very well invested and care about the player base from a personal level, and really care. And I think a lot of those names that you mentioned do really care. Like when you talk about people like Shaper and Pongo, who like run like the Commander library and were admins for r/cEDH and stuff like that. Like those are like that's a big role in the community, and it cultivates a lot of. Where the discussions and things like that are held, and so like they kind of have an inside ear to all of that information, especially when it would come to making decisions on what would be for the betterment of the format.
Yeah, and of course I think the whole Conquest project is a testament to some of those skills being leveraged, right? I think Conquest is an excellent example of what a balanced multiplayer format would look like. It's not cEDH, but it was never trying to be. But the people who took the time to build it and to run it understand the complexities of doing so. And I think it was Shaper, Lurker. I know there's more folks who are on that team. Don't hate me for not knowing you all. But like that's those people as well, right?
Yeah, hate on Nicholas in the chat below. Anyways. But yeah, do you want to bring up the next topic?
Yeah.
Ian?
So what do you believe the vision of this format is, and like how can we determine that, and how would this knowledge be applied when considering what cards to be banned?
So I think the first thing, the most simple metric is what turn format is this format, right? Right now, right? See what in your mind, if you had to pick a turn, and I'll give you up to quarter decimal precision, so you could say like 5.5 or 5.25, what turn is cEDH right now?
4.5.
3.6.
Why such a specific number?
Those are final answers?
Uh-oh. Yeah, I'll say 4.5. Is that just pick a number? Is that
3.6? Final answer.
Wait,
I think you're both completely off base, for what it's worth. I think cEDH is a turn 2.5 or maybe a turn 2.75 format.
Really?
The format, there are decks that win on turn 3 on the play with upwards of 90% consistency, which means you need to be relevant in this format by turn 2. If you aren't relevant on turn 2, your deck is not viable in a meta filled with 3 other Ka0s. It's just not. If you put 3 Ka0s at the table and one other deck, and that deck doesn't do anything by turn 3, your deck will never matter. That's just how it is. Like, not every game is triple Ka0 pod, but at minimum, that's our floor, right? At minimum, our floor of relevance in the fastest of the fast pods is like turn 2.5 or turn 2.75, I think.
So you're defining what turn the format is based on the turn of relevancy, not the turn the game ends. Because like the reason why like I would pick a number like 4.5 is because like if I were to use James for example, Squirrel Mob's metagame project would say that on average games end on turn 4 to 5. But you're saying if you're not prepared to answer or win the game by turn 2, that technically that's what the format is designed for in your eyes.
I think to my knowledge, when we talk about formats that aren't this, like when we talk about like a 1v, like modern is a quote unquote turn 3 format. The game ends in meaningful. Either you have an answer for decks that win in turn 3, or your deck is irrelevant, because there are decks that win in turn 3, and just because many times it is 2 decks that are turn 6 decks playing against each other, they're still relevant by turn 3. They just don't end the game by turn 3. So I think in my mind at least, and people who play 60-card formats could correct me if I'm wrong. Like maybe I'm misassessing this, but in my mind, when I understand that term to be is the turn at which the game will end unless the decks at the table are able to realistically prevent that deck from doing so. And there are many decks that are turn 2 decks in this format, and there are certainly hands that are turn 1 hands. So I lean towards the sheer raw power of the decks in this format to be sort of a guiding floor for what the target speed or at least what the current speed of cEDH is.
No, that's cool. I just wanted to make sure that we
we're on the same page.
Like establish that right away.
Totally.
So that way, yeah. No, yeah.
Do you guys want to revise your answers now that we're more clear about what the definition, or at least what I'm defining it to be?
Well, now that I heard your answer, I'm going to say 2.5 because no, I would still argue that I think that it would be like a turn turn 4 format. I think that yes, you need to be relevant by turn 2, but I think that most of the action at most tables happens at turn 4. I think that's when the game starts, in my opinion. Like things happen at turn 2 to 3, and there's definitely decks capable of that. But usually, because of how this game is built, the game doesn't really start, I think, until turn 4, and that's when win attempts start happening, and it's win attempt after win attempt after win attempt.
You've clearly not played against me.
Well, consider this. Our meta is like Blue Farm, Cody, Silas Rog. Like we play very fast. I play Turbo, Breach, right. Jessica Isha. Like we're fast, but like it's also like a bunch of dudes pointing loaded guns at each other, and it's like, all right,
whoever goes off first loses.
So.
Yeah,
but
that's very fair.
But to bring it back to the question, yeah. So we established like what we would consider like in your view, right? We're at like a turn 2.5, turn 3 format. Mm-hmm. So then from that point on, like, what do you think? From establishing what turn it is, continue with like what the vision of the format is from there.
Yeah. So with if we were to take that and find our definition, whatever we choose it to be, right? Maybe we decide it's turn 1, maybe we decide it's turn 5, right? Anything is in theory valid as long as it's consistently upheld, right? And to understand what pushes a format towards those things, we need to talk about, right? Like basically your enablers, right? There's 3 relevant resources in Magic. Like 3 tangible resources, which are the cards in your hand, the mana you have available, and the life that you have. I mean, you could make an argument for permanence, but that's mostly an extension of cards. So it's cards, mana, and life. Life is inflated to all hell, right? A fair, balanced cEDH probably has less than 40 life.
Yes.
But maybe people don't want that, right? So maybe our vision is going to start to include, or is going to continue to include, a combo-centric non-viability for aggro decks at the 40 life total. The next is our mana, right? Are we continuing to leave fast mana as a staple in our format? If so, then our mana crypts are still around, our soul rings are still around, our mox diamonds, our LEDs. These are all cards that by definition must remain in the format if we want to maintain the feel of the mana, the way that the decks play. The final piece is, of course, cards, right? And so big heavy payoffs like Ad Nauseam, Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze, which while doesn't draw you cards, certainly accumulates lots of cards for you to have access to. Things along those lines that allow you to either curate large quantities or refine it, right? So our tutors, of course, worldly, demonic, vampiric, enlightened, mystical, right? Like having not only strong access to finding the cards, but also that the cards themselves are powerful. What is our vision, right? What is the goal of what it is that we're trying to do? Are we trying to make it so that the mana that we have is fast but not too fast? Well, what is too fast? Are we trying to make it that our decks are consistent but not too consistent? Well, what is too consistent, right? Are we trying to make it so that we do have powerful, splashy payoffs, but they're not too powerful or too splashy? Like, what does that even mean, right? That's the type of that's the philosophy that we really need to dive into, and that's not a conversation. That's not even an idea that I could express in an entire hour of a podcast. If that was the only thing we talked about was defining format vision, we would not get through all of the things that there are to be said, right?
No,
and that goes like that's just a testament to the complexity of balancing a format, right? Like, what do I think the format should look like? Well, I want to play with Ancestral Recall, so we should unban it. Okay, but why? Right? Like, what's the basis for that? Like, why is that a good choice? What does the format benefit from including it? And the same argument
I get
can
to
be
play
made.
it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like I own my recall, and now it's going to be worth 6 times as much, and that's why I want to play it. It's like, no, that's not a good reason to unban Ancestral Recall. I think it's a totally fair card for cEDH in its current power level, but that's not the point. But like, that's the, what should the vision of the format be? I don't fucking know, man. Like, I don't have that kind of time.
As you started talking about it, and you're like asking these like hypothetical, like, what's splashy? Is it too? I'm like, man, this sounds like a sucky job. Like, if someone would have to do this, I'm like, this sucks. Like, this is not fun at all.
Yeah, you have to go through like the top 150, top 200 cards played in cEDH and evaluate each one from all of these metrics and be like, okay, do we need to ban a fetch land? Do we need to ban all the fetch lands? And then there's other like existential questions, like, is the mulligan rule correct? Are the way that we handle turn orders correct? Do we want to provide a buff to the people who are in seat position 4? Do we want to provide a nerf to the people in seat position 1? Are partners in the way that they're structured balanced and fair? Do we want to allow Yorion to be played? Is the deck size important or relevant? Do we want to, again, and I mentioned earlier, like, adjust life totals? Like, there's tons of hypothetical, like, existential format questions that you could, in theory, decide to explore if the vision for the format changes. The question is whether or not they're a good idea, and why, right? The question at the end of the day is why. Why are we going to do something specific?
That's a lot of questions can't be answered by one person alone.
It's just funny as you're going through it. I'm like, oh my god, my head's starting to hurt. I'm like, just thinking about. I'm like, my respect for the rules committee is growing slightly in every question.
Because I looked into it, right? Like, I want to know, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit back and say that I have the right answer, but like, I'm curious. Like, if I'm going to criticize the RC, then I at least should know why I'm doing that. And then I went through and I read and I learned and I tried to build my opinions and understanding. And then I got to the end and I was like, fuck, that's tough. That is tough. That is a tough job.
Yeah, I guess like that's something that a lot of people don't like really look into or analyze. Yeah, because like I know even like making this episode and like writing down like the topics, I'm not thinking like too hard about it. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, what's the vision of cEDH? I don't know, go fast and win, right? Like that's like all it like that's like the layman's definition of that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah.
In closing, it's tough.
In closing, it's tough. Yeah. So then something that I think is like really interesting to ask, and I think it's going to segue well for the rest of where the theme of this podcast is going to go. When looking at a ban list, right, and when you look at 60-card ban lists and how other formats are played, something that's really taken into consideration is what strategies are being played and what strategies are most utilized. So do you think if there was a cEDH ban list, do you think that it would take on some sort of strategy continuum, or would it look to diversify and develop new strategies with the cards that they ban, something that's done in like Standard, Pioneer, and other 60-card formats when they determine bans? Because that's like true competitive, right?
Right. The diametrics of aggro to combo to control, right? That's your traditional three-pronged deck classification strategy. cEDH doesn't really operate right now on that sort of dichotomy, right? Like, if we were to try to fit it into 3 categories, I think the closest that we have, or at least the words that we currently use, are, fast combo, adaptive or mid-range, and stacks. And within each of those, there's subcategories of exactly how those all function. But all 3, for the most part, and this is starting to change, but all 3 for the most part end with a combo, right? They all are combo decks. It's just more a matter of, do you want to combo early? Do you want to combo in the mid game? Do you want to combo in the late game? And
Charles has
decks,
entered the chat.
Yeah, right. There's certainly, and I know that like Winota, for example, did a really good job of convincing people that you could actually kill people without a combo. But those decks have a skill floor that is much, much higher, right? It is much, much harder to sit down with a win conless stacks deck and expect to get a 25% win rate than it is to sit down with Cody or Rog Silas or whatever, right? Just windmill slamming ad nauseums as fast as your little heart can tell. Like there's a skill differential there, like learning to combo and learning all of the nuances of table talk and politics. Anyways, back to the continuum, back to the strategy. I think that the question that would be opened up is, do we want this version? Do we want the CRC to create a format that is cEDH but different, or a format that is not cEDH? If it's cEDH but different, then you're just changing which combos win the game. That's all you're doing, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think I would enjoy cEDH but different more than I would enjoy a format that's not cEDH. If you want to make the format not cEDH, then you can make aggro viable and make Voltron viable and push people towards strategies that are more in line with the aggro and the control and because combo is already represented, but the aggro and control of 60 card, right? Like mono blue Talrand control is not viable. But if players only had 20 life, then it's closer to being viable, right? And so it's things like that where I know for me, I want the spirit of cEDH to stick around. I think that maybe there's a few power level bans that can make the format better, both in bannings and unbannings. But I still want to play cEDH. I still want to play the experience in the core format that I've grown to love.
For sure.
And I think that if you came in and you were like, we're gonna do a power level continuum and ban all this stuff out and change the way the format plays, people are just not gonna play.
So you still want cEDH to follow that like continuum, like you addressed earlier. Like most cEDH decks, let's take like Grixis or like any 4C list, they still have essentially the same combos. It's all like blue decks, blue and black decks have like the Thoracle, Dockside loops. It's all basically the same at the end, but it's just the different assemblers that can get you there. So you want it more cEDH to follow more of that line, with like a few like spice cards here. Let's unban this. Maybe this will help to diversify the format a little bit and maybe help to like change or like impact like a strategy.
Yeah, I think that there's some number of, if you don't remove the enablers, the tutors from the format, right? If we leave all the tutors intact, then people will always use the tutors to get to the most compact win condition. And you can ban those win conditions out to a certain point, right? Maybe you want to draw the line at Dualcaster Twin Flame. Like Dualcaster Twin Flame is fair. Anything more powerful than it is not. Anything less powerful than it is, right? Whatever you want to define it as, right? A combat-based main phase only win condition that requires an A+B that's 5 mana, right? Maybe that's where you draw the line. As long as the line is drawn clearly in the sand somewhere, it mostly doesn't matter outside of player reception, right? Like where you choose to draw the line doesn't matter. But if you want to target the consistency, right? People find Thassa's Oracle to be a boring end of the game. You ban Thassa's Oracle, you ban Breach, people are just going to find something else, fit those 3 win conditions into their deck, and every game is going to end that way instead. Like it's not, because at the end of the day, the core reason that the games are ending that way is not because Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation is the most powerful thing to be doing, although I think it's an argument to be made that it is. It's because it's the easiest thing to get a hold of, right? It's the easiest thing to tutor for, and it's the thing that has the highest card quality within the context of the rest of your list.
It's the most compact.
So, yeah.
I mean, I don't see a difference between Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation and Dualcaster Twin Flame. It still takes 2 cards.
Yeah.
No,
it's just a couple more mana is all.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely an interesting take, and like something that I think that you brought up that people didn't consider was like when you're talking about that like the cEDH the same or cEDH but different. It is different when you start eliminating cards and you start removing it, because we have this meta, and the meta is dependent on the cards that everyone else is playing, right? Like, yes, there's a large slew of counter spells, but the fact that people play Reb, and why Reb is so good is because it does hit a Thoracle on the stack, and most counter spells can't hit a creature, right? And it's like once you start eliminating and adding cards, the entire meta shifts to a place that now it no longer feels like cEDH. And something else that I thought was kind of interesting was your take on like making aggro accessible and making something like a Voltron strategy viable, right? Well, Voltron is EDH, right? And if it's weird because when you talk when we first started this discussion, we talked about like cEDH is a meta, right? It's EDH but different, but only different because of the cards we choose to play. It's not that the rules are different in any way. But like Voltron is a very like dependent strategy in casual. Like people love Voltron, it's awesome. But like it's people have tried to make it viable, and it's close. There's Ishai decks out there and stuff like that. But like Voltron doesn't really exist.
Not rules.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's not really it's not a strategy as much as like something like Stacks or Turbo or something else would be. And it interests me to wonder like if there was those bans in place to make something like that more accessible, would it feel more like competitive EDH instead of cEDH? Like would it feel more like high powered like casual? You know what I mean?
That's a really good question. Would it feel more like EDH if we were to adjust the rules to enable strategies that are common in EDH to be cEDH levels of power? When are we going to start adding rampant growth to our decks? That's what I want to know.
That might be like, imagine. I just think like this is completely hypotheticals, but I just think back to like things like, man, like if you start banning cards, like it does make like your casual pods now competitive, right? Like, oh man, my rampant growths and my 3 visits and stuff, these are ramp cards, and it's like in cEDH, it's like, no, I'm not playing that junk. Like get that out of here, right?
Yeah, so they don't tap for mana right now.
Yeah, so it's food for thought, right? Because like that's something I always wondered is like, is that what the like would that make the casual players happy? Like if cEDH was actually just EDH at that level, or is it because they don't want to play these cards, or would it just change and make everything else now 3 visits is broken in their eyes, or whatever?
I mean, I think the casual player base is just fine. They got their rules committee. Like if we were to build the CRC in some way, we would not. I can't imagine that we would look at casual player base with any amount of thought, right? The exact same reason the RC doesn't look at the cEDH player base with any amount of thought outside of exactly Flash, which, for what it's worth, I think is absolutely exceptional. I think it is absolutely outstanding that they are so rigid in their opinion of the format of the meta, right? I think that any CRC has to be extremely, extremely reluctant to ban cards. You just have to be. In order to make the format successful, you have to keep it stable. But I think it's very interesting. Like when you talk about format identity, is it trying to be cEDH? Is it trying to be, high power? Is it trying to be EDH but scaled up? Like what are we trying to do with it? And I think that's a really interesting question. I haven't thought about that.
I think that also ties in with defining what the vision of the format is.
It does.
So, yeah. Speaking of changes. How do you think, to use changes again, how do you think changes like this would affect tEDH? And for those of you who don't know what tEDH it is, tournament EDH. How do you think changes like this would affect tEDH? And should tEDH be a consideration when making bans in the hypothetical sense, or the RC looks at bans currently? So
I think tEDH. Yeah, no, I got the sentiment. No, you're good. You're good. You're really good at reading stuff. I'll share that. God,
who wrote these questions?
I think that the first argument in favor of the CRC is tEDH, right out of the gate. Like, as a TO, I have the ability to ban cards from my tournament. Right, I could ban a card from my tournament and call it cEDH, and nobody can stop me. Like, people could get mad. The community could like not show up to my event. Like, there's obviously still recourse and consequences to my actions, but nobody's gonna stop me from renting a hotel room and saying, "Hey, everybody, come to my tEDH event called Oktoberfest." And also, we have banned Krark. Like, they can't stop me. They can get mad at me. They can not show up to my event. I could be an abject failure, but they can't stop me from doing that. And I think that's one of the things that we need to that we are. I mean, not that we need to. We are right now. We're looking at understanding what the implications of cards are on tEDH. There are some cards that cause problems in terms of collusion and king making and spite play, and since we can't rule on collusion, king making, or spite play from a policy perspective, we can rule in terms of cards, and that was the Ramses discussion. For those of you who don't know, Ramses is a card that allows you to essentially concede to make one player win the game. And normally that doesn't matter, right? Like in a 2-player game, if one person concedes, the other person by default would win the game. But in the context of Ramsey, it allows player A to concede, which makes player B the winner, regardless of what player C and D do, which is just king-making, right? That's the definition of king-making.
And the way it's worded, it seems like it was a card that was designed for EDH play.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that they wouldn't take that into consideration.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think Ramses is going to get banned. But Ramses is the type of card that we might want to ban out of tournament EDH because its only purpose is to king make, right? Like maybe there's an argument to be made that it's like a good deck. I don't think it is, but maybe it's fringe, right? Maybe it's a fringe cEDH deck. The reason people would be playing it is because they're trying to king make their friends. And if that's the reason that it's being played, then I don't want that card at my tournament. And it's easier to ban the card than it is to ban the players. The same question came up with Kark at Marquesa, just because it caused so many time delays, right? So many complicated judge calls. Like Libby literally had to rule outside of policy. There was like, this is a situation that we don't have policy for, so I'm going to make up a ruling because we don't have policy for it. Like we can't rule on this because of the way you fucked it up. We didn't have any issues with Kark Sekishima at tier 1. So like the warning to the community from Marquesa was like, hey, don't be bad at this deck. Only be good, and if you're good, you can come play it, and if you're bad, don't come and play. And then at tier 1, we had no problems with it. The deck did not pose any timing restrictions or timing problems, which is a good sign. It's a sign that the lesson or the warning was heeded in some way, right? Maybe it would have been heeded anyways. Maybe what I said and what I did with regards to Kirk was unnecessary. Maybe we would have had no problems. But like the community needs to be prepared for tournament organizers to make decisions that are important to the integrity of the tournament that have nothing to do with meta, right? I'm not choosing to. I would never choose to ban Kark because of a meta call. I would choose to ban it from a logistics perspective if it causes problems at my events. Now, I don't think it's going to, right? We had an event where it had no problems. I'm going to be at Cash Cards in a couple weeks. If there's no problems with it there, then we're certainly not going to be looking at it for Oko. And if there's no problems at Oko, then it's off our radar, right? It's the kind of thing where if we have problems with it, then we have to do something. But if we don't, then we don't. So I think that tEDH is one of the strongest arguments to avoid the RC's rules and regulations as it stands right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that definitely makes some sense. Like tEDH, like you said, is probably the best excuse for like creating a CRC. If it would be like, hey, we're gonna take all the TOs that run tournaments and we're gonna make like, are there cards that we need to ban for tournament logistics reasons, right? And yada yada yada. It wouldn't really be like a CRC, but it would be tournament organizers saying, hey, like these are the things that we see. Problems or can be future problems or whatever, but I think that you have to be wary with it, right? Because like the community is very sharp, and like, especially like something like Kark, right? Like, obviously you've had your opinions voiced on Kark, but then like not only were there no problems at tier 1, but it won tier 1, right? So now it's like looking at it from a perspective of like, oh, you just don't want this deck to win anymore, stuff like that, and like it becomes a big community problem. Like something like Ramses, right? I don't think it would be a problem if say you got rid of it, because like I think we've talked about it before, and like it's been a discussion that's been around, but like I don't think it'll ever be a problem because of the statistical likelihood of it being able to be useful. But where it is a problem is going to be like LGS play, and like when like you're playing a competitive pod for packs or for store credit or whatever, and there's only 8 people that show up, and you can guarantee you're in a pod with one of your friends, right? Like that's where it can become like really a stingy thing. And so like, but it would be the first of its kind, right? If you guys did say like, oh, we're going to preemptively ban Ramses, like, okay, now everybody's on their toes because what's next, right? So it's a hard decision to make as TOs or anything like that.
Yeah, and I don't want to just like decide, right? Like I'm not just gonna just be like, hey, you know what? Ban. Like I'm not. That's not a good solution. Like nobody
go
wins.
get the hammer.
That's not a good solution.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, like we need to have conversations, right? The community needs to have conversations. One of the benefits that I have from my position is that I'm pretty tuned in to tournament organizers. I speak to a lot of them. I'm connected through the hub. I'm connected through SquireBot users. I have a lot of experience working with TOs. And so if there are problems, I typically get to hear about them, which is good. Like, that's a very good thing for me to be able to improve the product and the guideline that we set, right? There's a lot of people who are using Monarch's playtest list. That's a lot of responsibility for us, right? We are shepherding in the idea of what is and is not an okay card to make a playtest version of. And that's a lot of responsibility. Like that's a lot of pressure on us to make sure that we do it right. And so we're taking the time to revise what our policy list is going to look like for Oko, right? We didn't pick the one from Marquesa randomly, but we certainly didn't spend, months upon months refining and making sure it was the right list. And so being careful to set guidelines from the beginning that are right for the community is very, very important. And so I would this speaks back to the CRC idea in the first place. Like you have to come out of the gate with the right decision the first time. You won't get a second chance.
No, I don't think the community is very forgiving when it comes to things like that. So it is something that you'd have to be very wary of. And I think that you know that. I think that you've done a great job. Like for an example, right, since we're talking on the topic of Ramses, right, you went to a lot of different like community places to discuss it, and I think you got like the notion of what the community thinks about banning cards as a tournament for as a tournament organizer in any respect. Like you kind of got the vibe. It seems like most people are reluctant to the idea because they haven't seen it yet, right? And like they don't know if a card like that would be worth implementing it on for the first time. Now, say if like I don't know. It's so complicated. It's so because I was gonna say like we'll say like Flash, right? Like if a tournament, but still, then people would be probably even more upset because that card is actually a strategy, right? And if it's out of like the RC banning it versus a tournament organizer banning it, like there's definitely a different.
I mean, Flash is something special. The power level differential between Flash and Ka0s Oracle Demonic Consultation is the power level differential between Tolarian Academy and Gaia's Cradle. Like, we're not even talking about the same league of card. Like, there are, and I think people don't realize that about Cradle. They're like, Cradle's almost as good. And it's like, no, Cradle isn't even remotely as good. Like, if Tolarian Academy is a 10, Cradle is a 2. Like, that's how fucked up Tolarian Academy is. Like, if you've ever gone Dockside for 8, tap Tolarian Academy, make 8 blue mana, now you have 16 mana, like, the game's over. Like, that. You can't do that. You can't put 8 creatures into play on a single turn, right? There are no 0-drop creatures that are worth playing like Moxen are, right? So
you tell me you've never Avenger of Zendikar Gaia's Cradle.
No. I mean, like I've Avenger of Zendikar moved to the end step, flip my Itlimoc Cradle of the Sun, and use that for Gaia's Cradle on the following turn. But no, I've never Avenged Zendikar straight into the Gaia's Cradle.
That's like the only thing I could think remotely close to Dockside Tolarian Academy.
Yeah. And so, Flash, if Flash was still around, that's the kind of card that I look at to ban. Because it is at that power level that is so, extremely out of context and so extremely out of reach. Whereas everything else, like all the other cards, like Ka0s Oracle is not powerful enough to see a ban. Like it's certainly a staple, right? It's format defining, but it's not format warping the way that Flash does, or the way that Tinker would be, or the way that Tolarian Academy would be.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on to the best segment of this show, flavor text of the week. For those of you guys just tuning in or don't know what the segment is, it is where I can try to stump the cast on the podcast and you, the audience, with the flavor text for Magic history. So please have your answers ready and make sure you use the spoiler tag in our Discord. I think it's the Discord channel. It's called the Flavor Text Judge. So let's get started. So I will start with the cast's flavor text. This one should be easy. Everybody should get it. So it soon became obvious that some experiments were best overseen by fireproof teachers. Do you guys need me to say it again? Or
it's a red card, and I don't have any further idea.
You're wrong.
It need to be obvious experiment. It's not a red card. By fireproof teachers, what's a creature that has that's on fire? Is there like a creature that exists that's like on fire? Fireproof teachers. I can't think of. I would think like you said experiment, so immediately I thought of Crom. But I don't think it's Crom Ludovic's Opus, right? Because like I don't know lore wise. Is it like Seasoned Pyromancer? Is that even cEDH playable? Not a red card.
It's got to be a blue card or an is it card then.
I don't know. Is it?
Well, is it would is it?
No, it's a blue card.
Is it would entail red, right? You said a blue card. Can you read it one more time?
It soon became obvious that some experiments were best overseen by fireproof teachers.
What blue card would that refer to?
Quenching fire or some shit, or fire denial, fire blast.
Oh no, there's no way Hydra Blast is played in cEDH, right? That wouldn't be.
It's not that. I'll give you 2 hints. 2 hints. It has Karn in the background picture, or background art, and it's from Urza block.
Urza block with Karn in the. Is it Windfall?
Sorry, these are cEDH viable cards only?
Yes. From Urza's block. With Karn in the background? What the heck card?
I mean, I know my cards, but I don't have a clue.
It has a white brother.
It has a white brother. Yeah. So it's a card that has something similar to a white card that exists, like the same effect.
The exact same effect.
Card in the.
Some may call it a staple in white based strategies, core white based strategies.
Core.
I've had no idea.
Come on, Adam.
Am I supposed to know this? What?
After the hints I gave you?
It's a staple. It's a staple. Has a white brother, and it's utilized in core white-based strategies. Considered a staple. The only cards I can think of that are staples in white are like Savine's Reclamation, Ranger Captain of Eos, Grand Abolisher, Silence, and that's like about it. That's like the most staple cards I can think of. Ephemerate.
Your favorite card to play against? No, against Cody, Rog.
Rule of Law.
Okay. Now what's the blue brother?
Oh, what is the blue Rule of Law? You should know this, Nick. I don't know this because I don't play.
Arcane
there you
Laboratory.
Go. Arcane Laboratory. All right. Now for the audience's flavor text. Where Jin Cataxius ingenuity meets foreign Klext's inhumanity. I'll read it again. Where Jin Cataxius ingenuity meets foreign Klext's inhumanity. Put that in our Discord. And yeah, moving on. I think, Adam, you want to ask the last question of the night.
Yeah, I want to ask one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up here. So, Nicholas, for the last question, do you think that the ability to implement guiding principles from our format would greatly affect the principles reflected in tEDH? For instance, applying the guidelines of the IPG on things such as collusion and lying, which may directly affect the cards being considered for bans. So, like, as a part of Monarch, right, you guys have established the IPG. Now, as a CRC, like, if we were to separate the formats, would you like try to choose cards based on like the multiplayer rules and maybe just ban cards outright that don't work well in that scenario? And then do you think you would, like you talked about, like you can't really implement rules or set rules for things like kingmaking and things like that. Do you think that you would have to put something in place if we were to separate the format?
How do you think the community would feel if we banned path negation?
I have no idea. I think the community would probably be really upset about that.
Yeah,
but at the
they
same
would not
time,
be pleased.
Yeah.
Path negation causes more problems than any other card in terms of kingmaking, spy play, and collusion. I mean, not really collusion, mostly kingmaking or spy play. Like, path negation is the poster child card for cards that cause problems in tEDH from a structural perspective, right? As opposed to a mechanical or a game perspective, right? From the perspective of the tournament, from the perspective of determining the outcome of the game, path negation is the card that causes problems, more so than anything else. How would we feel if it got banned? Well, not great, right? Like that's an important card in our format. It is meaningful. It matters. So how would we consider tEDH when we talk about guiding principles? Well, the question is what crosses the line, right? I think path negation doesn't cross the line, right? I think that we can handle path negation by saying players may always make legal magic plays, and in untimed rounds, games can end in draws. Therefore, it is almost always true that a player with a path of negation wants to be able to use it to stop a win, even if they die as a result, because it's possible for the game to end in a draw. So it's from a tournament integrity perspective, we've already kind of solved path of negation by giving players an answer. They know what they should do. They're still allowed not to if they don't want to, but they know what's like optimal from them from the perspective of a tournament. With a card like Ramses, though, that's a different story, right? Like Ramses, the type of card that I could just ban it without feeling even remotely bad, because it doesn't do anything in the format already, right? But it's not always that simple, right? There's more to it than that, and so I would be, I think that the whatever the CRC would happen to be would be built off of not only a strong understanding of preserving the values of cEDH, but also preserving the needs of tEDH, right? That community would certainly serve both, but I don't think that it should lean towards making tEDH simpler rather than using and allowing TOs to figure it out. And I think that's one of the values of the RC that I think we would want to bring through to the CRC if we were to establish one, is that in as many situations as possible, let the players figure it out for themselves. Like, if we don't have to ban it, only ban it if we have to, kind of principles.
Yeah. And that brings up a really good point, because I think that the community does, for the most part, do a good job of the players just figuring it out themselves. Like if there's one thing that the general community, just the Magic community in general, is good at doing, it's pressuring people into not doing things, right? So like the idea of like pact of negation,
for better or for worse.
Yeah, basically, it's like with the idea of like king making and stuff like that. There's a good consensus that unless you like. Obviously, in tournaments, it's different when points are into consideration and stuff like that. But like, it's not really that big of a problem because you don't really see it that often. And when you do see it, people are usually reserved with it, or they reveal it at the end and they're like, "I could have done it, but I chose not to because it would have led to feels bads," right? So like, for the most part, I think that the players have kind of done a good job of like just kind of figuring shit out themselves and working it out amongst the community entirely. I don't know if you would agree with me on that, but that's kind of like how I look at it. I think that sometimes when you look at certain areas like Twitter or stuff, for example, it looks like the community can never agree on anything and we're always fighting. But I mean,
so when I run events, players figure it out, right? Like if I take king making calls at my events, not because I'm going to rule on them, but because I want players to have a conversation about it. And players almost never get mad. Right, they just want to play good, clean Magic, and as the format grows, as tournament Magic grows, tournament EDH grows, people are going to have more and more incentive to king make. They're going to have more and more incentive to, make decisions that are not quote unquote good, clean Magic. But right now, the community plays a lot of good, clean Magic, and that's really heartwarming, and I think really evident of what players want. Players want to play good Magic. They don't want to lie to each other. That's not valuable. That's not a resonant gameplay experience. And I think that that's another value from the RC, right? The players want good games. Just help them, build them structures that allow them to play good games, and that's all that they're ever going to want.
Yeah. I think if cEDH does anything really well, it's that we play at a high competitive level, but continue to have fun even doing
the RC
so.
Is like the parent, like is like the parent, and we're kind of like the children. The parents like, all right, here's some toys, go figure it out. And then I feel like
we're just playing.
We're just playing and having fun.
Yeah, we just want a sandbox. Is that too much to ask?
Just give us all the toys, and we'll figure it out ourselves. Yeah. No,
and if we get dirty in the process, then that's a learning lesson for us. And
yeah, we'll learn from our mistakes, and next time we won't. Yeah, we won't do the same thing. But I think that was like a good note to kind of end this discussion on, because like obviously we're talking purely in hypotheticals. I don't think we're planning on creating a CRC and like trying to separate from EDH. I think you brought up a good point that like Magic and cEDH in general is in a good spot right now. Like when you consider the meta in the games, there's a lot of deck diversity. There's a lot of people trying and brewing new strategies. I feel like certain cards are being put out there into our sphere of the game, right? Like there are cards that are designed with cEDH in mind, I believe, and you see it with every set, and that can be considered a good thing or a bad thing, but it incorporates new ideas and new brews, and I think people are very comfortable with that. And so I think like in general, I think after like talking and having this discussion, I think we'd agree with you that like things are kind of close to perfect, right? It'll never be perfect, but they feel really comfortable for the most part. And I think that's a really good place to be.
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. And the increase in tournaments, I think, is a testament to that. Right, we're seeing more and more people want to run things because it's fun. The format's fun to play. It's a good place to be right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to close out the episode, I think that on behalf of like Naus, me and Kian would like to say thank you for coming on. We really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Yeah, you are definitely a big name in the community, and you have a lot of say and not say in as in things that happen, but you definitely cultivate a lot of the play space that people occupy, right? Between Monarch,
I have more influence than I want.
Yeah, but we appreciate you coming on and shooting the shit with us for an hour and just kind of like talking about kind of just like a fun discussion about shit that like matters to us, but maybe not matter to everyone else, right? Like these hypothetical situations. But with that, I think we'll move to our cleanup step. So, Joking, this is your last opportunity to talk about the stuff that you've got going on.
Yeah, so support me for the CRC in 2024 when I run for election. I want to thank both of you for making the time to have me on. I love podcasting. I really love having the opportunity to speak my thoughts in long form. I just don't want to do any of the work in running a podcast. So I just decided to become famous and then go on other people's podcasts. And so I appreciate you guys taking the time to give me a platform to speak some nonsense into the world. And hopefully for your listeners, you guys got something out of this. On my front, again, just, don't follow me on Twitter. I don't need any more fame, but, follow these yahoos on Twitter. Come out to Oktoberfest. That's what matters to me. Support Monarch on Patreon if you want to have more events, right? Events are very expensive. They're hard to do. But we're going to continue to try to make cEDH a wonderful place. We continue to make this community a wonderful place and keep growing. So I think, in closing, just, come to my events. They're fun, I promise. I'll see both of you there, right?
Yes, you'll see both of us there. Yeah,
good.
It'll be a good time because all Monarch events are amazing.
The only problem I have is Oktoberfest in November. We need to fix the name here.
It's Hey, it's not our fault. Wizards literally scheduled Magic 30 on the weekend that we had a week after we had sent a contract. Like, we booked in October, and then WotC was like, "How about we just do our 30-year anniversary the same weekend as you?" And we're like, "Oh, thanks."
That was like
we have to move now.
That was such a hectic time to be a new hire at Monarch.
Yeah,
and all that was going. I was just like, just like
that was a bit of a mess. So but things are getting tidied up now, so that's nice. But it'll be in October next year, 2023. Mark your calendars. It'll be
the start of your
October.
campaign.
No,
or the pre-campaign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to campaign for 18 months, just like the U.S. presidential election. That seems like a healthy thing to introduce into cEDH is more politics.
It's a political game.
As if the discussions of the last few weeks weren't enough.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think all those things are amazing. Like I said, I do work for Monarch. We're doing our best to bring as much positive content to the community as we can and really just help grow the format because we think growing it is what needs to happen. I mean, it's in a good spot, like we said.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, believe it or not, competitive EDH is fun. As a reminder, too, us, Naus, are sponsoring the Ka0s 4 webcam tournament, and you guys should really sign up. The prize pool that we're offering is valued at over $1,000, and our goal is to try to get 200 people to enter this tournament, and it looks like we're on track for that so far. The deadline for signups is September 10th, which is the day of the tournament, as long as it's before the players' meeting in the morning. It's a totally free and proxy-friendly tournament, so why wouldn't you join? Or at least tune in to the tournament to watch me and Kian cast the games live.
I'll play. I'm playing in that event. I'll be there.
Yes, this is the type of stuff we want to hear. We have a lot of really cool people and really cool content creators that are coming. So if you want an opportunity to play with someone that you've always wished you could have the opportunity to play with, that tournament might be the chance to do it. And for those of you that haven't already joined our Discord, what are you waiting for? get in there. We pride ourselves on being one of the more community-driven content groups and love the feedback that we get from our entire family at Naus. You can talk to us about episodes, get deck building advice, or just chat about your day. We're also local to the Milwaukee metro area, and we have channels specifically dedicated to local meetup games and tournament locations and discussions surrounding the local community, and we would love to have you there. And finally, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, drop us a review, or share us with your friends. It helps us to grow our channel and gives us the ability to work with new people like Nicholas and reach new audiences as well. And with that, I think we'll end that episode here. So you guys have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one.
See ya.
Peace.